Hi everybody, my name's Gareth Hathway. I'm a Union Learning Support Officer for the Wales TUC. I've been given the pleasure of interviewing a few ULRs who have been dealing with coping with COVID, I suppose, and seeing how their roles have changed, what they've learned, what they've done differently, what they would like to see done differently, and then see if there's any lessons we can all learn as a group on that, really. I'm going to give each person an opportunity just to introduce themselves. So if you can just say your role, your workplace and your union, and maybe a little bit about your workplace, so we've got a bit of a flavour of the sort of challenges you're facing at the moment. So for example, things like, are you currently dealing with redundancies in your workplace? Are people being furloughed? Are you a key worker? Those sort of things, just to paint a little bit of a picture. So I'll start with Shaun on that one. Shaun, you here? Do you want to give a little introduction about yourself?
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, great.
Yeah, good. Right, so my name is Shaun Murphy. I work in Tata Steel in Talbot. I've been there for 43 years, which is quite unusual in these times to be in a job in 43 years. Yeah, so I've been there 43 years. I've been doing the ULR stuff for about 3 years as part of the GMB. But in Talbot, we actually use a multi-union format for all ULR stuff. So we all get together. Well, before COVID, we used to get together and have a monthly meeting. Since COVID, everything's been via Zoom. I think we've had 2, maybe 3 meetings in that time, and normally we'd have 1 a month. So things have sort of fallen off the register. What we're currently doing in Talbot, two-pronged approach by the different ULRs in a place called the Boss Plant, which is part of Steel and Slab. Mr. Phillips is pushing IOSH. We've got 100 tickets there to go, and roughly 30% of them have gone already. So people are looking to the future and thinking, well, if I can get a qualification for nothing, if I'm made redundant, at least I can use it on my CV. So that's one push. And the other one, which is the one I'm pushing, is mental health. So what we're doing in Talbot, and it has gone nationwide outside Wales, is that we're doing mental health webinars with Jackie Rafferty.
That's really useful. We'll come back to focus on a little bit more on that now, Shaun. If we just give everyone a quick introduction, and then we'll come and focus on the great stuff you've been doing in your workplace then as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, great.
Next up, we've got Paul Partridge. Paul, do you want to just give you a little introduction about yourself and like a brief flavour of the sort of challenges you're facing?
Okay, hello there. I'm Paul Partridge. My main role is shop steward for the site in Mega, Wilco site. I actually work for the transport contractor, which is Wincanton, and I've been working here 13 years and been involved in union learning for the last 5 and the ULR for the last year or 2. We, as I've said in the breakout room earlier, we have kind of benefited in some way because of the pandemic, because we had key worker classification in terms of hygiene products to the general public, and so we've been extremely busy, and everything has sort of carried on normal work-wise, if not improved from a business perspective. As far as the learning is concerned, as you can imagine, being in charge of drivers, tachograph hours are long, and I'm grateful to Pam in the breakout room for mentioning how difficult it was getting people involved, and a lot of that is to do with the time. So that's always been a challenge, even in peacetime, as it were, you know. So there have been different challenges as the pandemic has come on, but I believe that the chance to have learning online, I think, is revolutionary if it is sort of trotted out and downward, so that people become fully aware and they can take advantage of it.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's wonderful. That's great to hear. And I think there's some really interesting themes coming through so far around like Shaun talking about mental health, and I think that's something that we can explore in a little while, and also that online learning opportunities as well. But also that also presents its own challenges. So I think we can explore a little bit that in a while as well. Last but by no means least, we've got Jan James. Jan.
Morning, everyone. Well, my name is Jan James. I'm the CWU Learning Coordinator. In my role, I cover from Newport down to Cardiff, Swansea, and as far as Haverfordwest. At the moment, the biggest challenge we have is we have a massive campaign going in the CWU called Count Me In, because BT and Openreach are forcing compulsory redundancies, and they're attacking our terms and conditions. This is obviously helping learning, because I think people are getting a bit itchy and thinking, well, you know, I need to update my CV, so this is going to look much better for me. So in that way, it's, even though it's a challenge, it's also helped learning. And the other things we'll cover with whatever other questions come up, really.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think one of the things that's worth looking at here is how your roles changed, I suppose, during lockdown. So I imagine more and more things going online would be one of those challenges, but also like it's been touched on in terms of opportunities. So, and I'm happy for whoever wants to come in on this to take this question, throw it to the floor, as it were. After this lockdown, do you imagine online learning still being a bigger part of your offer, or do you think you'll go back to more traditional learning? And if you could talk a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages you found doing that, that'd be really useful. So I'd like to take that question.
I'm happy to come in, because it's one of the big things that I've found is a possibility for the future. Things like videos, lessons, or the potential for things that you can dip in and out of, give the opportunity for people who don't have a lot of time to learn in the wee small hours, or at times when they are, you know, their downtime, which can be at any point in the 24-hour period. And even with my own learning and trying to engage in other courses, it literally just comes down to the access, which is through the ability to have the time to do it, or to be in a certain place at a certain time. So that's why I'm saying it's revolutionary, in that I believe this sort of access has got so much potential to the individual, and so much of the learning is about the individual, that we've probably been waiting for this as a stepping platform for learning to really take off. And that is how I feel about it. And it's purely just through observation, because I've got to tell you, this is the first Zoom meeting that I've been on by my own hand, as it were. I've been on Teams and Zoom through company situations where somebody else has set it up for me. That's the first time that I've ever done this on my own. But I already spotted the potential through other people setting it up. So even today is a learning session for me, in order to pick up what I need to know, to then disseminate it downwards and try to get people on board, you know, which is the hardest thing for me. If I could tell people that there's learning that's available according to them just getting access to online, then it solves a lot of problems for me, creating more learning.
That's really useful to know. And you know, we've discovered that it helps people work around different commitments, like you said, like if they've got family commitments or work commitments, you can slot those sort of learning opportunities, particularly if it's different modules. You can do a little module here and then a little bit there. You can sort of break that up, and you're not spending all the time in the car traveling to somewhere and your entire day's taken out. It does present those opportunities, but then there's also those digital barriers as well for some people, I suppose, and how we overcome those. So it's managing that. And yeah, I find that sort of those opportunities and challenges quite interesting. Jan, Shaun, you got anything to add to those points?
Yeah, I found that we've had much bigger intake of learners since COVID. And that's because of the different way we've had to learn to reach out to them. Whereas normally, like I said, I cover a big area, and we have other ULRs within our branch, but it's still a big area to get around everybody and try and speak to people. And we've got remote engineers that we can't, get out to them. They park at home, they go to work, they come back to home. So it has made me rethink on how we reach out to our members. It's been a huge learning curve for me as well, because the CW has an online system called, we call it OLS, and it holds all of the CW membership data. So I've had to teach myself how to use that, how to do mail merge. And what I've been doing is doing a monthly newsletter and using the mail merge to email out to, because we've got every member's email address. So emailing out, targeting courses that are in our targets with Wolf, and everybody seems to be sort of reading those emails, responding, and we've had a huge amount of new learners. And I'm sure, at the end of this project, Welsh Government's going to look at those targets and think, whoa, how have you achieved all this? And unfortunately, it's been because of COVID and the way, reaching out to, different people. And obviously, finding online courses, people I think are preferring, because they don't have to be in the same place all at one time, and you've got to do it, say, every Tuesday, and something comes up. So, they're in control of their own learning, doing the online method. And I thought people wouldn't want that, but that seems to be what people are wanting.
Wonderful. And it's great to see you're engaging with new learners that you wouldn't normally be engaged with through this as a method of, expanding your offer. And I think lots of those short bite-sized courses work much better online than they would if people had to travel and take time out to do it as well. So those opportunities as well. Shaun, do you want to speak a little bit about how you found online learning, but also you previously mentioned mental health. So maybe at the end of you talking about the online learning, talk about how you've approached that angle really in terms of offering mental health courses for people.
Yeah, like Jan and Paul, the online learning, I think, gives far more flexibility because being a steelworks, it's a 24/7 operation. So there's a lot of people, or the majority are on shifts. And speaking with the lads and the girls, they're taking up the offer of online learning. They fit it in, exactly as Jan said, they fit in with their life. So they do modules when they can or when they feel like it. And it's just more flexible for them. There is a downside, is that if things go wrong, which have gone wrong, I had two lads actually. They were doing a course, almost finished it, and they lost all their data. So they had to do the Kate course again. I did contact the Wolf manager about it. And it had happened elsewhere. So there are downsides to it, and you don't get immediate feedback like you do in a classroom setting. So you can't ask questions. It's more of a one-way street then of learning. There's no interaction as such as you get in a classroom. That's the downsides. As regards mental health, again, that's done via a webinar now. Usually before Jackie would come into a classroom setting, we'd have up to, I think it's about a dozen people in a room, obviously not applicable now or for the near future. But what we're doing, we've done, I think it's either three or four so far, but there's a maximum of 20, so we can get more people on it. It is far more interactive because same as we use in Zoom, we'll be using Teams, but it's basically the same application. And what Jackie does is the same as we're doing here, is use the chat box. So people aren't talking over each other if they want to. There's various exercises in the webinar that you can or cannot do. And you do it via the chat box, so it makes it less confusing. Plus, fair play to Jackie that she's very, very flexible with times. So what we do, we put the message out there, anybody want to take part in mental health training, and then we get the messages back, and then we agree a common time when people's against the calendars. So we get the maximum amount for that date and time, and then we run it at that point. And Jackie, obviously we consult with her, make sure she's available, and we run it. And we run one last Friday. It wasn't in Wales; it was in Sheffield, but it went extremely well. And as I messaged Lindsay earlier, that is a health and safety manager in work with us called Mark Gantley, and I'm also on Chef, which is a national forum, and we were talking about mental health in this, and so he jumped in on it and he said, oh, excellent. He said, really good. So we're going to try and expand it to more of the workforce in Port Talbot, Llanwern, the rest of Wales, because if you've got access to Teams, you've got access to this. So it is flexible. We don't know where it's going. Hopefully it will expand, and obviously we'll have to get other providers in then, because obviously if it does go any larger, we need more resource. So basically that's it. As regards the online learning, most of it's IOSH now. People want to learn that. And we've had 30% uptake of what we've got on offer within 3 weeks. So as Jan said, people are getting a bit itchy and thinking, I better get some more qualifications under my belt in case the worst happens and I'm let go.
Thanks, Shaun. And yeah, it's really important, I think, particularly now, to be thinking about how we can support our members with their mental health. And by doing online courses and by using technology to touch base with them, I suppose, like emails and that sort of stuff, to just make sure people are okay. It's a good way of doing that. So I'm really pleased to see you're addressing that need, and also that it's been really popular for you. One of the things I've sort of heard from what you're speaking about here is those new challenges that presented themselves, and then how you've had to learn new skills, maybe in terms of doing, like, where there's a new system you have to operate and that sort of stuff. So I think my next question,
like Zoom,
like Zoom, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I suppose my next question is, what have you learned about yourself over the last couple of months by being a BE and a ULR? So, and throw that to Paul first, I think, and then I'll come back to the other. I was going to say contestants then, as if I'm on a game show. The other person.
So I believe that I'm probably in a position just prior to what Jan has been outlining. We run a group email where we put out lots of information. It's very interesting for Jan to point out that she's feeding back more of the general WARF information. So I think I've got a lot to chat about with Agnieszka, who is our learning officer, in terms of generating more information going that way in order to get people in. Because as I said, I'm in a slightly different situation where there's been ongoing normality. So I still have trouble sort of generating people in the learning sort of direction, and it's a lot of good ideas in what Jan has said. So coming back to myself, as you said, what have I learned about myself? Well, the transference of the excitement of actually achieving learning is what drives me on to try and find ways to get that into the heads of the people who I chat to every day. They will say things to me like, I'm a woodhead. They use that as the term. We have a bit of banter about it, but I say, you're not. I said, you just haven't been in the right situation to be as good as you can be. So I'm going after them. You will learn, because I'm going to help you in that sort of way. But you can only do that sort of one by one on the walkways. But it's interesting the point you were saying about classroom learning. A lot of them have men of a certain age, if you like, have a bad experience at school, and it lasts. And breaking down those barriers is a double whammy hard because of the digital age. A lot of them had nothing to do with computers, and I count myself in those ranks, because the greatest part of the learning that I've picked out in recent times is doing a course where I've been able to organise all my files on the computer, and now I feel I'm sort of king of the world, because I can find things and I can use them, and it's created more time to go after learners, So the buzz and sort of excitement of achieving something, I need to try and get that into others, but I've had to go through it myself to get myself to an ability to facilitate others.
Great. Yeah. Oh, that's really good to hear. And it's good that you can look back on yourself and think, well, I've also learned this as well. So everyone grows together, I suppose, in that.
Yeah. I think my time's yet to come for the people, around me. I'm sort of ready now to probably be better at recruiting new learners than I have been in the past, which is the importance of that ongoing learning at every level, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. Jan, what have you learned about yourself?
Well, the biggest one is you're never too old to learn anything, because that's something I always kept, thinking. Every time somebody's asked me to do something or attend a course, or this would be great for you, and I think, oh no, I can't do that. That's not for me. I that's too difficult. And when you finish and you've achieved it, it's great. It's a great feeling. And so I have learned that, from my time of becoming a ULR, the amount of things I have done and learnt, I don't think there's a pad big enough to put a CV on now. And I never, ever thought I would ever say that. So, I've learned that about myself, and I've learned to all these barriers and hurdles. There is a way round. There's a way around doing things. You've got to be patient and just pick away at it, and don't feel deflated because everybody else and said, oh yeah, I want to do that course that you've advertised or something like that. Just move on, forget it, and just go on to the next project. And so yeah, that's great stuff. I suppose it's just adapt and change, see what's working, and if it's working, great, and if it's not working, how can we change it to make it work, I suppose. And move on from it. Don't dwell on it, because that's something I would have always done. Just move on, pick up on the next bit. That's a really useful piece of advice, I think, for ULRs watching on that. Shaun, I'm going to do my best blind date impression now, and I'm going to say same question to contestant number 3.
Well, my answer would be the same as Jan's, really, is that I look terrible on my webcam when I've seen it. It looks horrible. But apart from that, you just got to keep plugging away and keep at it all the time, because as soon as you lose focus, things start to drift off. I noticed it right at the start of COVID, that everything sort of dropped off the radar straight away. And I thought, well, if I don't do something about this in the works, it's going to die a death. ULR and wolf funding, will go by the wayside. It'll get forgotten about because you lose momentum. So I just kept plugging away, and I thought, well, the digital way is one way of keeping it alive until we get back to normal. So that's been my focus at this point, because literally you can't have meetings, you can't have in-classroom learning, as I said previously. So everything's got to be online. So I'll just push that as much as I can. And then when we get back to normal, start reintroducing the classroom-based stuff. Basically, that's it. You just got to keep plugging away. Everybody gets setbacks, no matter what role they do in. I mean, I've had loads in just the 3 years doing ULR, and it is frustrating. But you just, as Jan said, push it to one side, forget about it. You've lost that battle, pick another one, make sure that you've got all your resources in place, and just go for it.
Wonderful. And I think that momentum thing must have been quite a big challenge from this, this is the way I usually do things, so now I have to do something different. How do we keep that momentum going then? So I think again, the online courses sort of help help with that. Have you found it harder to communicate with members? I suppose are you still on site at the moment? So would that help?
Yeah, I'm fully on site. We did have a sort of short break at the beginning where we didn't have the facility set up so we could have social distancing. So they sort of, I wouldn't say furloughed, but half were in and half are out. But that only lasted a month. And then they sorted everything out and everybody was had come back in, so yeah, been fully working. Normally contact the people anyway, because as I said, there's a lot of people on shifts. So I normally do it via email. But there's WhatsApp groups as well. I set one up for the ULRs on site. We've also got a web address, which we haven't really used because we haven't had meetings as such. But you use all avenues that you can. Because the site in Tata is so large, it's very hard to contact people because although there's a lot of people working there, they're all very distanced from each other then. So the easiest way is to do it electronically.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, we've got 2 minutes left, so we can try and fit the next question into 2 minutes. Very brief question. So maybe like a sentence or two answer, I suppose. Is you've sort of already touched on it, I suppose, but if you could travel back in time and meet yourself as you are on day one, what one bit of advice would you give yourself? So I'll start with Jan on that one.
I would say have more confidence in yourself. You can do it. With hard work and determination, it can be done.
Wonderful. Great. Paul?
Don't let other people put you off in terms of if you identify a possible learning opportunity for somebody and they're being put off, or they're putting themselves off for past reasons or resistance to learning, is find other ways to sell it to them, and that's why I'm saying the opportunity of doing it in the wee small hours or online is there. Even if we need to set up the online scenario on site somewhere here that they can come and dip into it 24 hours a day.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. Is trying to find that hook, I suppose, that will draw that person into doing the way doing something the way they work with them. And then finally, Shaun. Yeah, absolutely. Shaun?
I'd have a better contact database, to be honest, and keep plugging away, especially at the upper management with us are all on board with this. It's the middle management that you always get trouble with. You just got to keep plugging away at them, showing the advantages, which we don't always do. So that's what I would do if I went back to day one, is that you build that relationship with those middle managers to say, look, you let these people go on these courses. This is going to be an advantage to you.
I think that's a great piece of advice. And I think that's something that I hear quite a lot from ULRs on, like you said, like senior management. They're like, great, I can see the benefit in this. But when it comes to somebody who has to release someone from a shift, for example, that's when things start becoming a little bit more complicated. And you're right, if you could build that good relationship there with those people and show them the benefit of the business case as well as the benefit for the learner as well, I think sometimes we get a bit more advantages then, a bit more release and stuff and time off for that. So that's great.
Yeah, we got a saying in the steelworks, production is king. If it affects production, it ain't happening.
Yeah. So. Well, there you go. You just need to show how the learning's helping production, I suppose.
That's the way to sell it.
Yeah. I just want to thank all three participants. I think, that was really informative. Some great answers there. And I think some food for thought as well going forward.